Okay, folks, here we go. I'm in my beautiful backyard that you might not be able to see. You can't really see, but yeah, here we go. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit first about just some crazy stuff going on in the news. Actually, it's just one crazy thing. Figured if I start doing these on my own, I will pick something that's just going crazy on the Twitter sphere and rant about that for a little bit. And this week, there is a 16-year-old girl from Sweden that is just getting everybody's panties in an uproar. Mostly people sort of more on the right than on the left. But she's a 16-year-old from Sweden, and she's just getting out. She's talking to the United Nations about climate change, and she's on global television just ranting in a very dramatic way about climate change and how it is sort of a disaster for the future, and this is just getting people completely all pissed off. People are like, oh, she's just getting propped up by the left. People on the left are just so evil. And I'm just like, what? That's what you got out of it? From my perspective, she seems to completely be up there from her own will. And it seems like a pretty emotional topic for her. And what's crazy to me is how climate change is a political issue. How if you don't really believe in climate change or climate change is happening, that's a conservative value. And if you think climate change is a thing and it could severely affect our future, that's a left issue, which just doesn't make sense to me at all. But anyways, and I'm kind of right in the middle. I think it's pretty obvious that we have some climate change issues. I don't think it's like some people on the left, I don't think it's a catastrophe just waiting to happen, but I think in 50 years it could be pretty detrimental, so we might as well start doing something about it. By the way, Starbucks has a new medium roast, pretty good. They don't pay me for this podcast. But anyways, this 16-year-old, I guess she has autism and something else, and people are going on about that. Somebody called her mentally ill, but anyway, she gets up in front of global television and is just going off about climate change. It's a little bit cringy and it's a little bit over dramatic, but I mean, she's 16. Who cares? And I don't think there's a conspiracy of all these adults, hey, get up there and push this agenda for us. I just think, hey, she's pretty emotionally involved or emotionally committed to dealing with climate change, and she's 16. All 16-year-olds are pretty dumb. Like, if you look back at when I was 16, oh my god, don't put me in front of any camera. But all these people were getting super pissed off about her making these dramatic statements and how it's some crazy conspiracy that all these people on the left are forcing her to do it. Like, settle down. Like, the right's always blaming the left about being so sensitive and getting offended. It's a 16-year-old on television talking about climate change. At least address the substance of what she's saying rather than, oh, it's some crazy 16-year-old girl talking on television. Anyways, that's the craziness of the week in the news on the Twitter sphere. So I will move on from that. If I spend any more time than that, I feel like I'm contributing to the problem. Anyways, so moving on from that, this weekend I went to a Bill Hartman seminar. Bill Hartman is a physical therapist, coach that co-owns iFast, and I'm somewhat familiar with his work. When I kind of got into the PRI, Postural Restoration Institute, that sort of education 3 years ago, I was a little bit more familiar with him, and a lot of people I follow on the gram sort of operate in the same circles as him. But anyways, he was hosting a free seminar just talking about pain and powerlifting, how to deal with pain as a powerlifter. Usually I don't like to go to seminars anymore because most of them are just a regurgitation of the same stuff that's been out there, and people just put a different sort of spin on it. So I honestly don't feel like I get a whole lot out of seminars anymore, but I knew Bill Hartman is a guy, just following some of his work, is a guy that just thinks on a sort of a completely different level than a lot of people. So I thought I could learn something from it, and I just wanted to broaden my perspective as a coach, as a lifter, because I think that's one thing you can do to always keep improving yourself, is just evolving and expanding your perspective of the whatever it is that you do. So that's why I went there. It was really good, got a lot out of it, and got me sort of more excited about how I train people, or just training people in general. The hard thing to do when you go to some of these things and you learn something new, I just want to like completely implement it right away, where I have to take a step back and, okay, what's 90% of what I do that I know works and I know is helping people, and keep that, and then just play with a little bit of stuff that I've learned. But anyways, I got a lot out of it, and I was really excited after I left. So I'll just kind of dive into what I learned, what he talked about. I want to use this as a way to, me explaining it will help me sort of learn, or be more familiar, and kind of make what I learned stick. So here we go. So from a movement perspective and how humans create force to go places, we have a current model of the human body being a system of levers and pulleys, which first glance it makes sense. We have muscles that attach to bones, and it makes sense that these muscles move bones, which from my understanding they still do. But one thing Bill started the seminar out with is how that model's outdated, and how the human body really moves and how we really create force to get things to move is our body is more of a pressurized system, and we have 70% of our body is made of water, and we have fluid in our body, and we have air in our body. So those things contribute to how we move. So it's not just, hey, this muscle acts on this bone or at this joint and my forearm moves. There's actually a shifting of pressures and fluids to get that thing to move also. So an easy way to think about this is, if you think about taking a deep breath into the front side of your rib cage, or even the front side of your belly, keep that pressure there, keep that air there, and try to bend. You can tell right away that your ability to flex your spine is limited. So imagine you create all that pressure, all the air from breathing in. Imagine you have a balloon in the front side of your ribs. You can't move through that balloon because there's all that pressure and all that air there. So you have to find a way to exhale that air and shift that air in other places, so you can find different ways to move. So, and then it's the reason why all power lifters, when they're lifting heavy, take these ginormous breaths of air and hold it in to lift heavy things. If you see somebody squatting heavy weight, you're going to see them take a deep breath in and keep that breath in the entire time. And that is very useful for a power lifter, because creating all that intra air and intra pressure limits where you can move in some places, and that's exactly what a power lifter wants to do. A power lifter wants to create all this air, or all this pressure, all this air, create all this pressure, and only allow movement where it needs to occur. So in power lifters, you just want to get to depth and have enough pressure, create enough pressure to kind of shoot you out of that bottom position of the squat to get you up. So when you do that all the time as a power lifter, you're in that perspective, you're increasing performance, because you're limiting places to move where you don't need movement, and you're creating all this pressure in areas where it's going to keep you most stable and help you exert force directly where it needs to go, which is the bar. So if you're squatting heavy weight and you have and your body's not super pressurized in certain areas from the inside, and you start to turn, you're not only going to probably miss the lift, but you have a much more increased likelihood of getting injured, because you do not want to turn with a heavy weight on your back. So powerlifting all these years, you create your body, from creating pressure in certain areas, your body tends to get smushed from front to back, and you widen yourself out. What that does is create pressure again in certain areas where all you have to do is worry about I'm kind of not explaining this perfectly, but you just want to create enough force in certain areas to drive all that force into the bar, and you really don't want access to other ranges of motion, because that's going to sacrifice performance. So your body deals with pressure in a way to maximize performance on the barbell lifts. And as he was saying throughout the seminar, to do this, you take things from somewhere else. So, and very, very common, if you look at any power lifter, all you have to do is look at the population and see generally what all these people are doing. If you look at power lifters, they severely lack internal rotation of the femurs. If you just lay somebody on the table, their feet are probably going to splay out right away without them doing anything. And they lack the ability to basically raise their arms overhead without arching their back. So you'll see these big arches, big wide rib cages flared out in the front, because that's where they're creating, or that's where they're putting all this air, all this pressure, and that's maximizing their performance for the barbell lifts, which is, hey, a-okay. But again, you sacrifice other things to be able to do that. So being able to do that, you sacrifice your ability to flex at your lower back, you sacrifice the ability to put your arm overhead and through your actual shoulder joint. So you limit full excursion at other joints in the body to lift heavy weight. So, as he was saying a lot through the seminar, not necessarily a bad thing unless you're starting to get a lot of pain in certain areas, and this decreased range of motion at certain areas might lend themselves to problems. So you get to decide, hey, do I want to keep lifting heavy and putting myself through pain, or maybe do I want to back off a little bit, try to access some of these, try to get access and increase movement variability to the system in a way where I can start accessing fuller ranges of motion at certain places. But doing so, you might actually decrease performance a little bit. I remember this was pretty cool, because he was helping a lady that got neck and shoulder pains during the deadlift. Worked with her through her deadlift, worked through her setup, had her change some things, had her change a little bit of the way she was breathing, and tested her on the table before, then tested her after, and her flexion at the shoulder was way better. And she said, so should I just start deadlifting like this all the time? He's like, I don't know. That's for you to decide. And I think she said something like, well, if that feels better, shouldn't I just do that? And he said, well, what if I just took 15 pounds off your next or 15 pounds off your PR, that by setting you up and having you deadlift that way? And it was like, whoa. So you get to decide what you want to do from a strategy perspective, because from a powerlifting perspective, what you're doing to be able to lift all this weight, again, you're taking stuff from somewhere to increase your performance in that area. So you get to decide if you want to continue to train through pain. Hey, maybe you don't even have pain. If not, then hey, you're in pretty good shape. But you get to decide if you want to do some things to help that might limit performance, not in the long run, but maybe in the short term, to make you feel better, and maybe you'll be able to train longer or train healthier longer. So that was the gist of what I got out of it, and something the one thing that has really kept me contemplating since then is just changing my perspective of how the body moves, and how it's not as simple as muscles pulling on bones to move those bones. You have to think of the body almost in a more broader sense, that there's fluid there, there's pressure there. You're taking however many breaths a day, and there's more pressure in one side of your body, there might be more pressure in one area of the body than the other, and that's going to affect your body's ability to move in those certain areas. And one thing at the beginning he did to sort of make this super clear is, I want you to stop right now wherever you're sitting, and I want you to not move a muscle and just sit exactly like that for the next 4 hours. Obviously your body's not going to want to do that, because certain fluids, certain pressures are accumulating in places, and soon your butt's going to hurt and your body's going to send a signal to your brain, hey, can we move? And it's like, okay, we want to move because we want to shift these pressures and fluids somewhere else. That's an easy way to make it super clear. So that was probably the big thing I got out of it, is understanding what is actually occurring in the body, what is not only occurring in the body to make it move, but what could actually be limiting range of motion, or what could actually be limiting movement in certain areas. It's not your muscles aren't tight. It might be you have so much pressure in one area that your body just can't move through it. It's a compressive strategy in certain areas that your body can't move through it, so you have to shift and move pressure to certain areas to access that range of motion or that movement that you were lacking before. And may or may not make you feel better. Like, more range of motion doesn't always mean, hey, that joint feels better, but sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But you get to experiment, test, intervene. This is what, again, he said, test. You get to test, intervene, retest, or reevaluate, and go from there. So all you really have, you don't know anything that's for sure going to work. You have some ideas, but you get to get creative. You get to test, intervene, and sort of decide what strategy you want to take moving forward, and trying to figure out what works moving forward. So it's kind of always a game you're playing in a sense. But anyways, I left 2 hours and 15 minutes in, just because I had to go back up to South Bend, but it was phenomenal. I thank him for sharing all of that for free, because it was super helpful, and it got me more interested, helped broaden my perspective. And that's, again, what I was going there for, is to broaden my perspective, and I think it helped. And I think I'll leave you with that for the day. I know I'm still working through these ideas and working through these thoughts, so it isn't as clear as I'd like, but that's part of it. And it can even maybe sound a little bit new agey, but again, think about taking a deep breath in to the front side of your body, holding that there, and then trying to flex your spine, trying to bend down. See how that feels, and then get rid of all that air and then bend down, and see how much easier it is to do that. And that's kind of more of an extreme, but it helps you kind of understand what's going on. So again, I'm gonna leave it at that, and I hope you folks have a good day.